It's one of the great turnarounds in college football. 4 years ago, 1-11. Now 12 wins for the first time in the top 5. A Stanford football season for the ages.
All right, we are back for another episode of Under the Number. Today, we are joined by Andrew Phillips, who is currently on the core team building Fanstake, a new startup, venture-backed, disrupting the NIL and college athletics space. We'll have him talk about that plenty. He's also a Stanford alum, Stanford football alum. He was there in the early days of the rise of Stanford football from worst to first in that those first couple years with Harbaugh. So very excited to jump in. Here's some old Stanford stories and to be brought up to speed on what's going on with Fanstake, because it's a truly disruptive idea in this kind of Wild West college football, and not just football, all sports more broadly, college athletics landscape. So Andrew, thanks so much for coming on.
No, of course, man. Thanks for the offer and looking forward to the conversation.
So before we jump into Fanstake, which we'll cover in depth, I do want to start back to your playing days. Talk to me a little bit about that first season at Stanford. 2006 was not exactly the glory days for the Cardinal.
No, it was not. So just as a bit of background, so I grew up in the DC area, went to a high school called Georgetown Prep, which is probably better known nationally for lacrosse, but we had a really good running back when I was a freshman, ended up playing on varsity. This guy got a lot of national attention. So as a result, I had a handful of offers, dozen or so, and ended up looking at Stanford. And the pitch to me was really pretty simple. It was, first of all, everybody has had that moment, every Stanford athlete, I think, has had that moment where you pull up Palm Drive and you just go, what is this place, right? Like something changes chemically in your brain the first time you pull up Palm Drive. It's just, the world is never the same after that.
Totally.
And so I definitely had that. And then the pitch from a football sense made all the sense in the world. It was a first-year head coach in Walt Harris, who had built a really successful program with the staff that he had now at Stanford at Pitt. Larry Fitzgerald and company had just gone to the Fiesta Bowl 2 years prior and, were nationally ranked. And he had a, reputation as a disciplinarian, which was the talk that the program needed at the time. And in his first year, had a top-ranked recruiting class with guys who ended up, becoming my teammates who were a year ahead of me. Went 5-7 and barely lost a bunch of games. People forget that 2005 year, they barely lost to UC Davis on a last second play, which before replay would have been called back. Ultimately they lost that one, lost to Notre Dame in the season finale in a kind of dramatic fashion, very close, similar thing.
That would have been a Brady Quinn team too. That was
Brady Quinn, Jeff Samardzija, that whole, I remember watching it in my girlfriend's basement in late fall 2005. And then, they lost to UCLA in a last-second field goal. So the pitch was, hey, we just got this guy named Toby Gerhart who carved up the California rushing record. You block for this guy. We just went 5-7 with 3 games where coin flip and we're easily back in bowl. Building a new stadium, lots of new emphasis around the program, lots of excitement. I'm in, right? And we promptly go 1-11 the next year. So it's I think the ultimate low point was there was a you might not remember. Remember the show Jim Rome is Burning?
Yeah, of course.
Heard of this? Yeah. So we're getting ready to go out to practice at one point, and we're 0-6, 0-7, whatever it was, and it's just the absolute valley of the suck, and it just practice is miserable. Everybody's miserable. No one's having a good time, and we're getting ready to go out. And the way the show used to operate was there would be these 3 kind of Chiron logos, and he would talk about each one and as in succession. And as we're getting our pads on, getting ready to go out to practice, the third logo is the Stanford logo with football. So we're like, okay, well, obviously he's going to talk about us. What could he possibly have to say about us? So we all kind of linger around. And he opens with, this just in, the Pac-10 conference has announced that they are changing their name to the Pac-9.5 because Stanford's so bad. And then it goes into this just onslaught of watching Trent Edwards just get rocked, who was this quarterback who had a nice pro career from the Bills and a couple other teams. But what do these nerds think they're doing? And he just goes into this whole thing, just absolutely eviscerating us. So that was probably the low point of that year. But yeah, then Coach Harbaugh came in and from the get-go changed the culture. He did something that I will always remember, in that it was Christmas break. Obviously we weren't at a bowl, so I didn't have practice. I was with my family in Florida, and he calls me maybe a day or two after he had been hired and had told me that he was calling every person on the team, basically seeking another commitment. Seeking it as if we were getting recruited. It was basically a recruiting pitch to say, hey, this is the staff that we're going to bring in. This is the energy we're going to bring in. We want you to be a part of it. And he didn't need to do that, right? We were obviously coming back. It was a different era. There was no transfer portal. We were all, going to be back. But it was something I always remember and I've contextualized into different moments in business and other moments in leadership where it was something that he didn't need to do, but he showed up and, we had a lot of work to do. We were not a good football team. We were not a good program, but it was that bit of confidence. And then all the other classic Harbaugh things, shooting across the bow at SC at Pac-10 Media Day, we bow to no program and, actually backing it up. We actually won that year. So we go 4-8, 5-7, 8-5, and then 12-1, number 4 in the country. But the foundation of it was this very simple act of calling everybody, getting everybody on the same page, getting everybody excited to get back and go to work. And from there, things just got better and better.
We were talking off camera about Harbaugh basically just ripping out, shredding up everything, the entire status quo, where you summed it up telling me that he essentially said, any traditions that you guys have are gone. You suck too much to have traditions.
Right. Yeah. It was root and branch. Just everything's gone. Like, oh, you've had this tradition, for the big game for all these years. It's gone. Like, oh, you've had a rookie show. Like, you're not allowed to have a rookie show because your traditions, like everything about your traditions must have led to this point. So we're just going to start fresh. And I think he rubs some people the wrong way. He's not the type of person that's ever really going to care what people think. And that's one of the things I really respect about him. But yeah, it was very clear from the get-go that this is, new program. And it did help us shed some of the expectations of what Stanford was supposed to be. Oh, we're supposed to be this West Coast. We were the seed of innovation for the West Coast offense, and we're supposed to spread the ball around and quick short passes and Bill Walsh style offense has been Stanford's MO for so long. And he says, no, we're going to run 13 personnel, 23 personnel. We're going to have 2 tight ends and a fullback, and just run people's faces into the ground. And as an O lineman, obviously you love that. You love the confidence that he instilled. And actually, that brings to mind the moment I knew he was serious about it. The first year I'm starting, so it's 2 years after, and we go to play Oregon State in the opener at home. And we had this package, it was called Bama, or a concept that was called Bama, where on the sideline, if you ever saw this, it meant run to the ball as fast as you can and run 36 power. So I was, left guard, it meant, okay, get up to the line as quick as you can and pull. And fourth and short of the game, it might have been our first drive, actually. No hesitation. Boom, here comes Bama. And I, in my mind, I go, oh shit, he really trusts us. Like this is new coming from a coach. And I, no discredit to Walt Harris, the guy got me to Stanford, but we did quick kick several times that year. People forget this, strategic punting on third down. Maybe you see that once a decade with most programs. I think we did it 3 or 4 times that year. So we go from that mentality to nope, 4th and short on our side of the field. Screw it, let's run power. And that mindset I fell in love with as an offensive lineman. It was just something you couldn't ask for more confidence in your coach than trusting us with that kind of moment when we hadn't really proved it yet. Moments like that, he just showed up for us over and over again.
And, I should have mentioned at the beginning that you were on the offensive line. Those years were the beginning of what became known as the Stanford Tunnel Workers Union, right?
That was it. Yeah, we had, I don't know, there was I can't even remember what the nickname was. It was something pejorative. It was like the Fat Boys or something like that when I was a freshman. And we had this moment as a team or as a unit where we just said, we want to set that aside. Like we're not playing fat guy football. We're playing tough guy football. And what embodies toughness. And Chris Marinelli's father was a tunnel worker, and we got this letter from the head of the Tunnel Workers Union in Boston. It was wishing us well for the season and talking about the values that they aspire to, or the values that our unit has displayed, and it just stuck and was great. I've still got sitting near my desk the hat that they sent all of the starters. It was a Tunnel Workers Local 88 hat, and I'll whip that out sometimes. But yeah, it was a wonderful thing for us as a unit to kind of pick that and own it and have it. And it's I've loved that it's stuck around as long as it has. But I've also encouraged guys when I've talked to them, that your thing can be your thing, and you don't have to be the Tunnel Workers, but you certainly appreciate that they've kept it around.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, just one more question before we transition to the business side. When you think back, you mentioned the Jim Rome thing. You mentioned again off camera talking about counting very few bodies in seats in the stadium at one point in your career.
To flesh that story out, there was one game my freshman year where I didn't break 300. I had a teammate who was counting one side of the stadium. I counted another side of the stadium. Between the two of us, we couldn't crack 600 people. So yeah, that was pretty low point.
Well, that might be your answer, but I was going to ask, what was during that crazy difference in 5 years when you stayed through your fifth year senior season? What do you remember as the absolute valley, and what do you remember when you think of the absolute peak?
The valley's probably Washington State that year, or the Jim Rome moment, there were several moments that year where, and it's something in, as you think back on your life, that you oddly are grateful for those moments of challenge, right? You're grateful for those moments where you don't know how you're going to, go on. And losing to San Jose State at their place that year, pretty low point when we were, expected to make some noise in the Pac-10. Losing all the games that we had lost that year. Having the walk be this depressing serenade of there's like a dozen people that are on either side, and one of them has like a Firewall Harris sign, just not the most encouraging, environment to be in. Pick your moment. It was just a tough thing to get through, but the absolute peak, I don't know why this sticks out in my mind, but you could point to the Orange Bowl. You could point to, which obviously makes sense as the pinnacle. We put all this work in, develop ourselves as a team, get to the point where we're competing on a national stage with the Monday Night Football crew, calling the game, Ron Jaworski and, John Gruden coming to practice. It just never in my wildest dreams as a freshman did I think we were actually going to be in this position. I'm practicing in Miami with the BCS logo on my helmet, just like wild, right? It never did I think that as a freshman we would get to this point, but there is this tone that used to shift, and this, like you're traveling home from school, you've got travel sweats on, you're on, some United flight going home. And the attitude from when I was a freshman, there would almost be this like, oh, Stanford has a football team, sort of thing. When people would see it, they'd say, oh, what sport do you play? Football. Oh, I didn't realize Stanford had football. Or, oh, I thought you guys were Ivy League. And then it shifted to, oh, you play football at Stanford? Like, wow. Like, what's Jim Harbaugh like? Oh, I saw you guys, beat the hell out of USC. Like, oh my God. And it was just this, it was a very cool thing to just notice that vibe shift of what it was like when people saw the broadcast and the reaction to that. It was this shift from, oh, you must be a really nice guy who's getting a nice degree and I hope you have a good time, to like, oh wow, you guys like beat the shit out of people routinely and I've seen it. It was that was a cool thing to be a part of, for sure.
I mean, the vibe shift on campus itself must have been kind of incredible too. I mean, how did that move? I mean, I know that Stanford will never be a fully football school that embraces it, but just there had to have been some sort of a change. Not that everyone would have started bowing down to you on campus. We know that didn't even happen to Christian McCaffrey on campus. That doesn't happen. Yeah. So that aside, was there just more of a liveliness around the program, at least, where you could feel the support of the student body?
Something that Coach Harbaugh used to say all the time was something along the lines of, I'm going to butcher the quote, but basically, you don't know how good you could have it when you start winning. And he used to go on one of these Harbaugh tangents where it'd be, the sun's a little brighter, your food tastes a little better, just walking around campus is a little bit more fun, professors greet you with a little bit more of a twinkle in their eye. He would go on this whole thing about how good you could have it when you start winning. And he was right in so many ways. I mean, it would be little moments like a professor, we'd have a big game against somebody, and you'd walk in with 2 or 3 of your teammates and you'd get this little nod of like, hey, nice job, guys. Like, saw you, great job against UCLA type thing, which never would have happened. And yeah, at its worst, I think every athlete that goes to Stanford goes to it understanding that it's not the place that is going to fill up an 80,000 person stadium every weekend. And in many ways, that's kind of one of the things that's attractive about it. Like you're not going there to be worshiped and to fall into this hero class of football player. You're going there to be a serious student. You're going there to candidly compete alongside and be in the same athletic realm as people that are way better athletes than you, like actual Olympians. I had multiple classes with people that won gold and silver medals in Beijing. They're like reaching a level of greatness athletically that you're never going to come close to, even if you go to the NFL. It's just not like, so you're going there understanding that that's the package that you're signing up for. But at the same time, like, at its worst, Stanford can be a place that is, cynical toward its athletes and cynical toward it, particularly because there are so many teams that are winning. When you're not winning, it's very easy for the average Stanford fan, I think, to, speak ill of, either in basketball has been going through this, but, they've seen a resurgence this year. They've had a great year. It's very easy to just say, oh, well, we suck at football. Oh, well, we suck at basketball. Oh, well, it's, but yeah, seeing that shift, it's not why you play the game, right? Like you could go through that. And I'd like to think that I never played it, seeking the adulation of fans, but it does change the atmosphere around campus. And, we used to joke the Stanford Stadium. I don't know if you guys had the same joke, but as calling the stadium the library is a nice, quiet place to do work. Yeah, I mean, gosh, you turn on 2009 against Notre Dame, Thanksgiving weekend. We haven't beaten Notre Dame in 5-6 years. They've got Manti Te'o and Jimmy Clausen and Golden Tate, and we've got Toby and Andrew and the future. 4-time All-Pro right guard David Castro, multiple guys who are going to go play in the NFL on both sides of the ball, and it's just like that place. It was just on fire. There was an electricity in that building that day that I had felt in big games for sure. I had felt against Cal and SC, and like in little moments, but gosh, like it. Put that environment up, and it's the game that should have won Toby the Heisman Trophy. But
right.
You put that environment up against anything across the country, you can't beat it. And Andrew Luck says this all the time. There is nothing like that place when we're good. It's just it is not. There is not a better place in the country when we're good. And it's. I agree with him when he says this. It's because you've earned it. Like you're doing it the right way. You've had to go and beat teams physically. You've had to go and out athlete teams. You've had to go and really earn it, and particularly given the the load that Stanford athletes take on, it's you've had to have earned it. And when you win, and I'm confident we're going to get back there. I'm really excited that Andrew's back at the helm, but when you win, there's nothing like it. And yeah, I got to witness that firsthand. The being on the the flow of that trough to number 4 team in the country and doing some great things with a lot of amazing teammates.
Well, thanks for walking us through that. I think it really is. It's been a while now, but it's still underreported just how dramatic of a turnaround that was. I mean, you were there for your tenure, I guess, is the embodiment of that, going from 1-11, 5 years later, number 4 team in the country. I mean, and steadily improving along the way, kind of bit by bit.
I keep waiting for like the ESPN 30 for 30 people to call me one day, be like, "Hey, it's happening. We're doing the like."
There will be a Harbaugh 30 for 30. If he ever retires, there will be a 30 for 30. His Stanford players will be like 60 years old. He'll be like 90, and that'll be your time.
He'll still be coaching at that point, and I'll look forward to that.
Yeah. Okay. So transitioning to this Fanstake situation, since you played college football, the amount of change is absurd when you really zoom out and look at it. I mean, you were playing, there was a BCS committee that's obviously long gone. We've since changed to a 4-team college football playoff, which has then been expanded as of very recently. The Pac-10 became the Pac-12, which now no longer exists.
May she rest in peace. Yes.
I mean, there have been rule changes. There have been the basically advent of the portal, obviously NIL and collectives and brand deals. And I mean, it truly is a different universe from 2016. Let alone 2008, 2009, 2010. So if you would, can you please give us a little flyover of the big kind of landmark changes and what has led up to this moment where a company like Fanstake finds itself so primed and ready to take full advantage of what is a fertile ground for disruption and change to an entire massive industry that is, college athletics?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And so the way that we look at it and the way that our founders characterize how we got to this point is the most immediate step toward that is you go back to last summer and there's a federal injunction that's placed out of a court in Tennessee that basically says, okay, you cannot, NCAA, interfere with an athlete's ability to negotiate before they arrive at a school what a compensation package of some kind is going to look like. Broadly, that's what this injunction says. So that essentially opens the door to Fanstake. But before you get even to that point, there are what have become. There's a number of different cases that lead into that. There's a Supreme Court case in 2021 with the 9-0 decision, the opinion written by Justice Kavanaugh that basically backs into this idea that you have what has been a undercompensated or purely uncompensated workforce, and starting to define, as and even prior to 2021, this idea that the college athlete, and more specifically the college football and basketball player, given the amount of industry and given the size of the market that's been created by those sports, there's an imbalance here, right? And there were conversations about it even when I was a player. I remember distinctly, and the things that have formed my opinion on why I ultimately decided to join Fanstake, why I get out of bed every day, the why that drives Fanstake. It's driven by a lot of these memories. But I remember distinctly walking into the Stanford bookstore with my parents, who would come in for a game day weekend and they wanted to buy a shirt or something, like every of course you do. And you walk in there and it's my senior year. Andrew's now been playing. This is his second year playing. Andrew Luck, and you walk around the store and you can buy basically anything with a number 12 on it. You could buy a t-shirt, you could buy a hat, you could buy a jersey, you could buy, I remember they had these like dog scarf things that had a number 12 on them. They had a 12 and a 7, which presumably was for, Toby or John Elway, but like 12 and 7 were the numbers that you could buy. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, there's something wrong about this, right? Because the other thing that, one of my other core Stanford memories is my freshman year, there were two friends. One was in my dorm, one wasn't. But the one who was in my dorm ended up telling the story over a weekend where he and a friend developed an app that was very quickly bought by Blackboard Media for over $1 million. And at the time, Stanford athletes and any athlete were not able to, capitalize on similar opportunities because that would have been construed as a, improper benefit. We had a teammate who was a really good guitar player. He wasn't able to go play bar gigs except under a pseudonym. He had a fake name that he used when he would drive to like Santa Cruz and play these bars, because otherwise that could have been construed as a, that's an improper benefit. So I've my own memory is, yes, there were the big moments of, there's obviously the House ruling, which is coming. The final decision on that is coming next month. There was the decision from the Supreme Court. There was the federal injunction. There were this myriad of other cases and moments where the NCAA has had chances to defend itself, and particularly as the argument switched to more of a antitrust conversation, the legacy that they've held up has just not stood up to the facts, right? But so there's that, and then there's my own memory of just my own anecdotal observations of just, this isn't right. There's something about this system that is just not right. And I can understand the argument for amateurism. I have personally benefited, I think, from this system that set at its purest ideals does provide opportunities for sure. Like, having the opportunity to go to Stanford for free and do the things that, no one's going to look at that and say, well, if, that's not an enormous gift to give somebody. Of course it is. But on the backdrop of, there's this multi-billion-dollar industry that, and not even breaking out from your own school, there's this, there's this revenue that's being created by this activity that you're participating in, and then divorcing your participation from the revenue that's being created. It was just, the whole thing was dishonest from the beginning, and it was bound to come crashing down at some point. So any frustrations that I might personally have, they probably, the NCAA could have figured this out. There were debates happening on Stanford's campus. I remember there was a GSB hosted event while I was on campus talking about, what does the NCAA need to do to reform? And there were many conversations with leaders in sports about, there's, all this money that's being attracted by media contracts and by the conferences. And, at some point you're going to have to recognize the athlete participation in this, and it's becoming more and more professionalized. And it just went on deaf ears for far too long. And, we got to the point where it all just kind of imploded on itself. But it's, so I look at that and I have my own observations of just little moments of, okay, well, this isn't quite right. And then, ultimately got us to where we are. But I do think it's important to lay out also that, like, there aren't any bad players here. And I really mean that. Like the NCAA, yes, I have been critical, and it could have, been a bit more forward thinking in a time where, they were sticking to the amateurism model. And in a way, I can't really blame them, because that's just the charter that they were given. I can't blame collectives, certainly, because they were handed an impossible mission of, okay, don't coordinate with your coaching staffs, but also pay your players, but also keep it, for these specific types of activities. But also, if you want to remain competitive, these are the things that you're going to have to do. So just start paying your players. Good luck. I'm sure it'll be great. Like, that's basically what we told collectives in 2021, right? So you can't blame them. You can't blame players for wanting to capitalize on this very rare opportunity where they can finally start to make money. And you especially can't blame athletes that have been looking for and now are able to capitalize on the purest sense of like NIL deals that are the track athlete that gets a deal with the running shoe company, or the thrower who gets an endorsement from supplement company or something like that. You can't fault those, but those opportunities should have been granted when I was playing, and that would have been reasonable. It would have been reasonable at the time to assume, okay, Andrew Luck should get a cut of every jersey with a number 12 on it that was sold over the 4 years he was playing, or 3 years he was playing. I think everybody would have agreed with that at the time, and even if they didn't, it was the right thing to do. And eventually, that system just imploded.
Right, and I mean, you said to me that the kind of true north star of Fanstake is to set a true market for college athletes. So,
Yep.
I guess going bottoms up to that goal, explain how Fanstake really works mechanically and why this is a totally it's a new concept. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah. So Fanstake, and to simply explain it, is a platform that allows an individual fan to contribute to an NIL endorsement deal for an individual player. And by doing that, what we hope to do is ultimately create a true market for the NIL space and for college athletes to have a true sense of understanding their actualized roster value. And what should to take my own case, what should a starting guard with 3 years of experience earn? If you ask the sources that are available right now, you'll get 15 different answers to that question. And there's no reason you should get 15 different answers to that question. And one of the key principles that we live by is there's no market that operates more efficiently with less information. And a major gap that exists from players actualizing their roster value and collectives and schools being able to have a fair sense of what talent is worth. And the whole system is held back from operating much more efficiently by this lack of transparency. And yes, we want to give fans an offer they've never had before, which is the ability to contribute to a favorite player's NIL endorsement opportunity to either stay at or go to a school that you're supporting. If they don't do the thing that you're hoping for, you get your money back. That has never been an offer that a fan has gotten. So there's that compelling aspect to it. But if we do this right, the market efficiencies that should be created by having both talent and agents and collectives and schools have a fair sense for what should a top tier quarterback be earning, what should a kicker be earning, and we also acknowledge that for a certain percentage of athletes, maybe fair market offering is going to be a scholarship, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's going to be $10,000. Maybe it's going to be $40,000. And if you scale that out across all the sports, not just football and basketball, which is what we're starting with, one of the most interesting aspects of my job so far has yes, been leaning into football and basketball and trying to help piece together and figure out those markets. But it's been the questions that come in like, well, when are you going to turn to hockey? Do you know the numbers about hockey? And actually, there was a rule change with the NCAA that allows Canadian juniors to now play NCAA hockey. Changes the market for hockey talent quite a bit. What's our perspective on that? We don't really have one at the moment, but there's a market for competitive hockey talent. What's your perspective on wrestling? Another question we got. Well, we don't really have one right now. Well, are you aware of what a NCAA title contender is likely to earn in NIL earnings? It's quite a bit. It's north of six figures. It really surprised me. And then the same questions: softball, volleyball, track. There are markets filled with competitive and compelling cases for earning potential for all of these sports. So eventually, we want to get to a point where, and it's an easy stone to take in terms of criticism. Oh, we're just focused on football and basketball, and it's just the rich getting richer from the NIL perspective. Yes, that's where we're starting because it was the easiest place to start. But there are markets for all of these sports, and our goal ultimately is to help athletes actualize value in all of these sports, regardless of what they're playing.
And talk a little bit. I know that the current situation. So as you explained, you as a fan can commit, though it's refundable essentially in the event that the outcome, your desired outcome, doesn't happen. So you could say, I'm going to contribute to this pool of my fellow fans to get this high school recruit to commit to us in the first place.
Yep.
To get this guy potentially to transfer to us since he's just announced that he's entering the portal, whatever the scenario may be. In the event that they do, that money goes to the athlete. Your pitch worked essentially, and if they decide against your school, you get your money back, right? So
exactly, yep.
And very productized, formalized. Like it feels like a kind of a standardized transaction versus talk a little bit about some of the shady activity that goes on right now where people are basically approached on a street corner by a wealthy fan. And there are some kind of, under the table, not so vetted deals happening.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And before I get there, it's, just to paint this full picture, it's probably easiest to just talk about what's going on the platform right now with Nate Ament. So Nate Ament is one of the top remaining basketball recruits in the country. He's narrowed his list of schools down to 5. And he's a partner of Fanstake, so that there's an element to that too, where we've been promoting this as well. But what's been going on with Nate is a really good illustration of what we hope the recruiting picture looks like in if we get this right with dozens and hundreds of athletes as we go, which has been this. There is power, yes, in contributing funds for sure. And there is, if you look at the contributions that Nate has gotten, some of them are more than four figures. There's contributions for 4 or 5, north of $10,000, I believe,
from individuals.
From individuals, right? At the same time, though, if you look at the leaderboard, and Louisville has made his top 5 schools, but the contributions that have come in from Louisville, they have him at the top, and there's over $86,000 that's sitting in Nate's name should he decide to commit to Louisville. But that hasn't been made up of a majority of $1,000 plus stakes. It's been made up, in fact, in the majority. I think the average stake size is in the neighborhood of $25 or $30.
Wow!
And what that's uncovered is that there is power in the analogy that our founders use is this. Just as in politics, there's of course power in super PACs and TV advertising. There are certain things with big money that you just kind of need to be relevant. But there's also power in grassroots. There's power in localizing and activating at a community level. There's power in that door-to-door baseline activity that is just handshake politics. The same thing is now possible via Fanstake in the NIL space. You don't have to be a 5-figure donor in order to make an impact. You can be somebody who activates, as the Louisville fan base has done. You can activate your friends and say, hey, look, we have a chance to bring Nate Ament to Louisville. Like we've been cooking as a team. We've got a new coach. We've got, this is a chance to capitalize on the momentum that we've gotten and get, what is one of the top recruits in the country, a generational talent. And you can have that conversation within the Louisville ecosystem. And I've had multiple friends who live in and around the area reach out to me and say, hey, I just heard, Fanstake mentioned on ESPN radio because of what's going on with Nate. So yes, there's this ability for a fan who has the means to come in and say, hey, I'll give $10,000. And you see this also with Cooper Flagg. He makes one comment in The Athletic that, oh yeah, hey, I wouldn't mind staying at Duke necessarily. Seems to be having a great time. That then converts to over $50,000 in contributions to keep Cooper Flagg at Duke next year. Now, we're going against a rookie contract at this point, and we're all conscious of that. But it does give this interesting hypothetical of, okay, well, what could happen there? What would it take to keep Cooper Flagg at Duke for one more year? And we're democratizing that process where there's power, yes, in contributing your individual $25-$50, but you bring 50 friends with you. You share on social. You beat the drum of, hey, let's get this kid to Louisville. There's more power in that too. So there's a grassroots power in what we're giving fans as well, which is something we're just really excited to see. But to answer the second part of your question, yeah, I've heard so many stories, and one of the disinfecting elements of what we hope Fanstake will bring to the space is these conversations shouldn't be happening in the dead of night over Twitter DM where it's, somebody reached out to my uncle who reached out to me and said, oh, I could get you $100K more to transfer here, but then only to have the contract that you end up signing be contingent on things that are out of your control. And, oh, well, you just signed a bad deal. And suddenly you're painted to look as a selfish player, even though you were promised certain things. There's just, that system is not beneficial for anybody. It's not beneficial for schools. It's not beneficial for athletes. Keeping that information to the doldrums of to the back alleys of the Instagram and Twitter DM is just it's not a good place to have a thriving fair sense of a market. And that's what these players deserve is a fair sense of understanding what their earning potential is. And at the same time, schools deserve to have a fair understanding of what talent is worth, because for every story of a player getting a bad deal from a school or an agent, I've definitely heard stories from collective leaders of, oh, well, we had somebody come to us and say, oh, I need $200K more or I'm transferring because such and such school has just offered this to me, and they have no way of verifying that. So it's encouraging bad behavior on all sides of this. And the only way to to make this more efficient for everybody is just bring more information into the game, which is exactly what we're hoping to do.
So no one has a crystal ball, obviously, and the last few years have been pretty chaotic. I had a conversation early on the pod with Miller Moss, who started at quarterback for USC for the first major chunk of last season after sitting and backing up Caleb Williams prior to that. Caleb Williams was living in this like unbelievable LA penthouse during his time as the USC quarterback, fully capitalizing on the new NIL. Miller did plenty of brand deals and was, he was earning real money. So were plenty of his teammates. What he told me from a player perspective, which was shocking, honestly, I knew it was probably bad. I didn't know if it was this bad, was the lack of, I guess, basic financial literacy a lot of these players had. And my takeaway was just like, that's honestly kind of sad and very dangerous that these guys get a check, $50,000, and then they immediately buy something for $50,000. They have no thought of, one, trying to save some money, trying to invest the money, the tax implications that come with getting paid like that, like no clue. And I didn't know that when I was 19. Like, it's not like you're expected to know that. That just showed me from the player side of things just how new and kind of shooting from the hip everything seems to be happening. And, there are multiple sides to that. I said no one has a crystal ball. Do you foresee a kind of standardization or, I guess, regulation that is at least, maybe they'll paint with too broad of a brush, but do you expect more of a crackdown to prevent those types of like ambiguities and potential nightmare situations where these players make money, lose all of it before they even finish school? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, it's a great question because one of the only areas where you can find consensus in this space, and I had a mentor of mine who was this friend of my dad's, and he had this saying, which was, if anybody can tell you that they can predict what's going to happen with the election, he was a political consultant, but applying the same logic to NIL. If anybody says that they can tell you what's going to happen with the NIL space, they will lie to you about other things. So, take whatever predictions people make with a grain of salt. But the thing that you can see consensus in across all kinds of different parties is that there needs to be far more education, and there needs to be far more diligence in understanding how to inform, to your point, that if somebody's getting $100,000 check or they're getting a series of checks that come out and amount to $100,000, that does not mean that you get $100,000. That means you get, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $70,000 after taxes, right? And not taking into account how to budget, not taking into account how to tax plan, not taking into account that you even owe taxes, to begin with. Like these are things that you need to understand. And I think the only prediction that I'm really comfortable making is really more of a wish, but it's that there needs to be some sort of governing body or some sort of body of some sort. That's not necessarily a governing body, but a body that's representative of player interests. And I think the case has been made really compellingly by athletes.org. I think they are well positioned to be that body that can speak on behalf of athlete interests and rights and the sort. And the illustration that I take from, I went to the college football championship weekend in Atlanta. And while the commissioners were meeting for the different conferences, while there were all kinds of different meetings that were happening in Atlanta, the players and I want to say it was athletes.org members, I think from every Power 4 conference and then a handful of others, but it was football players that came together to discuss what the issues were that they wanted to focus on. And the point was made really well, which was all of these other bodies are meeting. Like there's a rules committee meeting that happens every year. There are all the conferences that get together. The conferences have their own meetings. And at no point has there ever been somebody sitting at the table with players' interests in mind. And if you go to leagues like the NHL or the NBA or the NFL, they have the NFLPA, they have the different players associations that sit primarily to speak on behalf of player rights and interests. So if there's talk of wanting to expand the playoff, okay, well, should players who are actually going to be playing those games have a seat in that conversation? That seems to make sense, right? Like there are rule changes that are made every year. There's a proposed rules change of bringing the new NFL kickoff. Shout out Sam Schwartzstein, NFL,
the engineer, right? The creator,
creator. Yeah. Hate it, love it. Bring it to Sam, but he's a creator of it, and love the career that he's had for himself, and super proud of him. But if NCAA football wants to adopt that kickoff, should players have a role in deciding that that's something that they want to see in their game and the games that they are going to be playing? That seems reasonable, right? And if you play that forward, there are all these decisions that are made on their behalf without their representation to account for and to give a perspective of a player. And my hope, and there have been some really good gains that have been made in this area. Jim Cavale, who's I believe the CEO of athletes.org, he was just in a debate with that was hosted by the American Enterprise Institute in DC, and really compellingly made the case for why players need a representative body speaking and representing them on their behalf. So my wish, not necessarily prediction, but my wish is that that body be recognized, and it, whether it's athletes.org or whether it's any of these other bodies that have come up, the National College Players Association, there are a handful of others. I hope that is something that is adopted, because it's urgently needed. And I do think it would help address the problems that you laid out of financial education, of agent certification, of standardization for NIL contracts, and making sure that some of these shady terms that you hear about on candidly both sides of this equation are just done with. And you standardize, what are practice terms? What are the deliverable terms that can be agreed upon, in a standard NIL contract? And you eliminate the differences. So that's not necessarily a prediction, but it is my wish, because that is desperately needed in the space. More education, more standardization to allow athletes to capitalize on this. What is a rare opportunity? And these are still college kids. Like it's only been, I don't know, it's been 10-ish years since I was playing, and you want to forget that, like, these are still 18 to 22-year-olds. This is still a really foundational moment in a young person's life. And, setting systems in place that are going to allow them to be successful is key.
Yeah, I mean, you said it at the beginning, the more transparency and information, the more efficient any system. So I totally agree. All right, really quick, we're wrapping up. I want to do a quick lightning round. I want quick, one word, one sentence, what comes to mind with some of these things and people. Favorite lift from your playing days?
Power clean.
Least favorite?
V squats.
Best away stadium you ever played in?
Autzen, Oregon.
Favorite campus, not Stanford?
University of Virginia.
Agreed. It's where two of my brothers went to school. You're a high school coach outside of Fanstake. I assume You're coaching up the line and probably a lot of the offense. What is your favorite run concept?
It's not even really a run concept, but it's stealing yards in sophomore football, which is you have a tight receiver that's off the line, and you basically turn it into a run play where you set your dog in the slot and just give him the ball. It's automatic 6 yards in sophomore football. It just works every time. And then set that up with a fake to an inside. It's just, it's like playing Madden with real people.
Switching to people. David DeCastro.
I'm going to not say the first word I thought of, which was Snorlax, because that was Sam Schwartzstein's nickname for him, that he's just this immovable monster.
Zach Ertz.
Dog.
Andrew Luck.
Goat.
Toby Gerhardt.
Oh, man. There's so many that come to mind with him. Competitor.
Final question, Jim Harbaugh.
What came to mind was potential, because he had this ability, and he still, I think, has this ability. It's what I think his players would tell you is that whatever potential you think you have, he's got that thing that great coaches have where they just extract more. And it's not always fun. It's not always pretty. But he has that ability to get more out of you than you think you have. And so potential.
Love it. All right, Andrew Phillips, thank you so much for taking the time to talk some old Stanford football glory days and obviously what we're doing with Fanstake now. Can you tell people where they can find Fanstake and get involved as a fan or an athlete?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're an athlete, absolutely claim your profile. If you go to fanstake.com and just scroll down to the bottom, there will be a easy form for you to fill out to claim your profile. Get in touch with us if there are stakes in your name, that sort of thing. But fanstake.com, learn about Fanstake, follow us on all the socials. We're on X, we're on Instagram, very active there. Find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm the most active. So linkedin.com/Andrew E. Phillips. On X as well, aphillips71.
All right. Love it. Hope to see you in person in a couple of weeks here in Dallas.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks again.